Good afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone to the evolving landscape of cybersecurity, namely risk, AI, and the human factor. Cybercrime's economic toll is exploding. We feel it's not only in our best interest, but in the best interest of every business and client we work with to continue to educate and help fight against these cyber criminals. With that said, I would like to introduce our featured presenters for today's panel. First, we have Sarah Gosler, who is a globally recognized cybersecurity expert and managing director and head of cyber human defense at Wells Fargo, where she leads the firm's human-centric strategy against sophisticated cyber threats through advanced simulations, training, and education. We also have joining us Jude Sunderbrook, who is managing director at Oak Trust Group, leading teams focused on cybersecurity and risk. He retired as a member of the Senior Executive Service after leading the Department of Defense Cybercrime Center, or DC3, one of 7 federal cyber centers. He also served in varied roles as a special agent with Air Force Office and Special Investigations, and in joint duty assignments with FBI, Cyber Division, and U.S. Cyber Command. Additionally, we have with us today Justin Ellerman, who is head of cybersecurity advisory services at Wells Fargo, where he leads a team of experts helping clients navigate the evolving cyber threat landscape through industry best practices. Lastly, I'm Troy Scott. I will be moderating today's conversation, and I currently serve as the head of specialized industry segments for Wells Fargo's Global Payments and Liquidity Division. The first topic I'd like to jump into, the current cyber threat landscape. Jude, let me direct this question to you. With cyber attacks reportedly affecting new companies almost weekly, how has the cyber threat landscape evolved over the past 5 years, and what are the major and emerging threats organizations should be prepared for in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think there really has been a shift underway. I think 5 years ago, there was substantially more attention that was focused on data theft and probably less focus on what is the emerging threat, which is business disruption. And by that, I mean, it could be a ransomware attack. It could be an effort to shut down or harm a company simply by taking elements of it offline. And I think that is an evolution. From a national perspective, there certainly are criminal actors that are based in the United States as well as outside of the United States. For those clients of Wells Fargo that may be in industries related to critical infrastructure, there is also the very real possibility that they could be subject to nation-state level attacks. So this comes at the same time that in some cases, companies are actually increasing sort of the size of what's known as the attack surface. And this is the ways in which these bad actors can try to hurt a company. So why is that? In some cases, it's because you're trying to do innovative things for your customers, like integrating operational technologies, the Internet of Things, and also integrating artificial intelligence. And depending on how these are deployed, they can be a means by which actors can actually get into your system and then do something that's called moving laterally, which is to get around and to create harm. That could be for the data theft, but it could also be to launch a ransomware attack or even to just try to shut you down. Similarly, the implementation of these blended situations where sometimes companies have certain things that are located in servers and storage units where your company is physically located. And at the same time, there's companies that are transitioning to the cloud. When you have things in multiple locations, it increases the opportunity for misconfiguration. So we have some evolving threat actors, and the technologies that companies are using has evolved. And together, that means that there's greater potential for operational disruption and also the possibility for data loss through theft.
Great. Thanks, Jude. AI is a big topic that we hear in the industry a lot right now. So let me turn the question to you, Sarah. As cyber criminals increasingly leverage AI to enhance their attacks, how do you anticipate the emergence of AI will reshape how organizations approach cybersecurity to defend against these evolving threats?
Going back a little bit into the threat landscape, in the early 90s, cyber was a government problem. There was, the 3-letter agencies that were focused on it. In the 2000s, it became a business problem, and now it's an everybody problem. And what's really perpetuated it becoming an everybody problem is the very fast acceleration of AI It's interesting. It feels like only a year ago we were talking about Gen AI, and now Gen AI is now old news, and we're on to agentic AI. Anybody using AI can figure out how to do open source intelligence, which means finding out a bunch of information on people very quickly. You can use an AI agent to create a prompt for a phishing email. So long gone are the days where it was a prince from a far off land with very badly spelled emails that was asking you for $10 million. And now it could be a very sneakily crafted email from your CEO directed to you with information that the attacker was able to get off of LinkedIn or any other site that's very, very convincing. And so cybercrime has just accelerated. There's a stat I like to talk about that a cyber attack occurs every 35 seconds somewhere in the world. And AI is continuing to speed that up. I would say within the next year, it's probably going to be closer to like 10 seconds. So that's a scary thing to consider. But on the opposite side of it is, how do we in cybersecurity leverage AI to keep us safe? So for every good thing, there's a bad thing, and for every bad thing, there's a good thing. A really interesting example of how I can kind of make AI real is how one of the use cases for how we use it within the firm. On any given day, there's trillions of different data points coming in and out of the organization. And there's no way a human being could understand or could actively look into each of those. We use AI and ML to be able to look for correlated events. And so that could be, as an example, if I badged in, I'm sitting in New York right now, if I badged in New York at 10 a.m. and then I badged in the Philippines at noon, that would be something called impossible travel. We would use AI to be able to track that. So there's just a ton of different ways that we're going to use AI to not only handle reactive events, it'll help us monitor, help us triage much quicker, but from a telemetry perspective, we're able to see across the landscape in real time and new insights in ways that we're never able to before.
Excellent, Sarah. Thank you. Jude or Justin, any thoughts on that topic? I know it's a big one.
I can build on that with some sort of recent examples we're seeing from clients and companies that we work with. And some of them are really, frankly, pretty scary. We've seen instances, just as Sarah indicated, where there is a very sophisticated social engineering that's taking place. We've also seen some things where that's been married with actual telephone calls that have been made as a complement to other activity, where calls are being made to people that are authorized to send payments around the world. We saw one recently where there was somebody who was speaking on the phone and they were about to authorize a multi-million-dollar wire transfer. But the question was, they weren't sure which of the accounts the CEO wanted it to be transferred from. And the attacker did not know that there were multiple accounts. So the person that was going to do the wire transfer manually went and checked, and that was where the plot became unraveled. So that's pretty frightening that things like that are happening, and it's a good indication of how attackers are using AI. I think as a counterpoint, I would agree with what Sarah said, that there's definitely opportunities there to use AI to try to create stronger defenses.
Thank you, Jude. Justin, when an organization suspects a cyber incident has occurred, what are some of the best practices, and are there things an organization can do now to be better prepared?
I think when it comes to cyber attacks, making sure that you have an incident response plan in place is really one of the most important things an organization can do, because when you're in the middle of responding to an incident, you don't want to be trying to figure out what systems you need to take down, who is going to be making decisions, who you need to engage. But really, if you were an employee and you identified something potentially malicious, you want to make sure it's reported to the right team. So engaging your incident response team, and then making sure that your legal team is involved. They may be internal, external, or both. Also, many organizations have cyber insurance. So you'll want to be engaging your cyber insurance firm as well, because there may be specific steps that are stipulated by your policy that you need to take within a certain time frame of identifying a potential incident. And then, of course, if there's anything financial related to the attack where there's fraud involved, making sure that you are engaging your financial institution, and then also law enforcement like the FBI through their ic3.gov website or the Internet Crime Complaint Center. But making sure that you are following all those steps in your incident response plan, and if that incident impacts services or products delivered to customers and clients, making sure that you have an incident communication plan as well, because history shows that if an incident is impacting your services, organizations weather the storm much better when they are transparent and open about the incident and what steps they're taking to get things back online. Some of those best practices include practicing that incident response plan. So make sure you're running through that plan and accounting for the most frequent or likely scenarios.
And so, Jude, I know with your background, what you've seen in your career, what are the main considerations organizations should think about in preparation for ransomware attacks, including whether or not they should pay those ransom?
Well, obviously, you want to do everything you can to have a strong cybersecurity program so that you reduce the possibility that, that you'll be subject to a ransomware attack. But unfortunately, it can happen. Companies and organizations are faced with difficult decisions about whether to pay ransomware, primarily when they do not have backups. And so there's some sort of simple ways to think about them. One is what's known as a 3-2-1 strategy. And so this would be to have 3 copies of your data in 3 different locations using 2 different storage applications, and then having at least one of them be something that's called immutable. And immutable is just a big word that means that you can't alter that backup. Now, how you do that, of having copies of your information in multiple places, can really depend on the company, right? So if you're a relatively small company and you have an on-premises storage, you nonetheless want to try to have backups that are located somewhere else. So if you're a really big company and you're processing millions of transactions, you're probably going to be having very, very sophisticated backups in multiple locations anyway, so that you can instantly spin back your capabilities. The reality is if you are backing up consistently in multiple locations, the odds that you will be able to decide if you're going to not pay the ransom are much, much better, because you're just in a stronger position because you can bring your company back online. Now, that leads to the next point, which is making sure that you can get your company back online. The configuration of storage can be quite complex, and you want to practice several times a year. And doing that will make sure the confidence that you're going to be able to bring your company back up online without pain. In addition to all that, you really want to have a ransomware response plan that is consistent with the best practices for any kind of incident that Justin and Sarah were already speaking about. The next consideration is does the threat actor have a reputation for keeping their word? And if it's one that does not have a reputation for keeping their word, then you might as well keep your money and figure out another way to bring your business up. This is a bit of a technical point, but I'll note that there are some ransomware actors that are in countries that are prohibited through an office called OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control. And it can actually be against the law to pay a ransom to entities located in those countries. And then the final thing, does the threat actor actually offer like a proof of life? If the ransomware actor can show you a piece of data that only somebody would have if they'd gotten inside your system, that unfortunately is a pretty good case that they actually have broken in. I would say that there's a few other points that are important, and it all comes down to preparation. You want to have a relationship with a law firm specializing in incident response, and have a relationship with a company that focuses on incident response prior to this if you don't have those capabilities in-house. In a lot of cases, you're going to partner with another company so that you'll be prepared to turn to them for support if something happens. Why do you do that? Some of it's because they're going to have access to ransomware negotiators. Some of that's they're going to be there just to do those things like figure out if they really have your data through the whole proof of life thing. And if you decide that you're going to have to pay, they're the ones that help you do that. And then finally, there will be people that can help you called a payment broker. And a payment broker is somebody who figures out a way to pay in Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency usually. So you're not actually giving your ACH routing data to the bad guys, which opens you up to a whole range of other difficult things. All these pieces together, it's planning ahead, it's having a plan, and it's testing that plan. And if you do that, the odds that you're going to be able to avoid a ransomware incident are much higher. And if unfortunately you're faced with it, the odds are much better that you're going to get through it with minimum disruption. I'd just say the final note would be is building relationships with law enforcement before you need them. In many cases, the FBI, Secret Service, and local law enforcement, they can be there and they're available to speak with. And in a lot of cases, depending on the sophistication of the ransomware actor, it's a good idea to have those connections in place so that you can consult with them as a complement to what you're doing with your incident response provider.
Great. Thank you, Jude. That's a lot of good information. One of the other risks we see is third-party risk. So, Justin, over the years, some high-profile cyber attacks have been the result of a third parties or vendors. How has the risk evolved over the last 5 years, and what steps could organizations take to help mitigate their third-party cyber risk?
Yeah, I think when you look at an average size organization who have probably thousands of third parties or vendors that they rely on to provide them services, right? There's a lot of failure points. And when you look at an organization who is a third party, and if they don't have the same level of cybersecurity controls that your organization requires, and they have access to personal information or any other confidential information that your organization has, then they automatically become the weakest link. Because if they have that access to that data, but they're not doing everything that they should be to protecting it, then they become immediately vulnerable and a weak spot in your organization's cybersecurity. So making sure that you are performing due diligence on all your third parties and taking a risk-based approach. And so making sure you're assigning a criticality level to all of those vendors, and that it's not enough just to do your initial due diligence when you're onboarding that vendor, but you're doing it on a recurring basis. So maybe your critical vendors, you're assessing them every year, and your high-risk vendors every 2 years, because if you just do a point in time assessment of their cybersecurity controls and you don't look at them again for maybe 3 or 4 years, well, the cyber threat landscape changes, the threat vector changes, the current cybersecurity standards change over time, and we're constantly looking at maturing the controls we have in place to mitigate the evolving threat landscape, and also identifying what third parties may have been reportedly impacted by a cyber attack and reaching out to them and engaging them to make sure that your organization's data wasn't impacted as well.
Thank you, Justin. Sarah, I know you've got a strong background in this area, so I wanted to direct this question to you. With every organization trying to achieve more with less, what areas of cybersecurity should organizations focus on to maximize ROI, especially when trying to gain support for non-technical executives?
I think cybersecurity budgeting 101 is make sure that you're partnering with the non-technical executives, the C-suite, the heads of the lines of business, to understand the value add of cyber. Cybersecurity, I think a lot of times can be seen as a blocker, but when cybersecurity is done well, it's actually a business enabler. And so having those conversations, I'm going to assume that most folks on this call are not technical, they're on the business side. It would be engaging with your cybersecurity and tech teams to understand the value that cyber is going to drive. So that's step one. Step two is knowing that it's not a completely open pocketbook. You have to prioritize. First thing you should prioritize is understanding exactly what are your organization's crown jewels. What are the top 10 business services that you might have that if there was disruption, it could be incredibly impactful, or even in some extreme cases, game over for your organization. That's where you want to begin your focus and then build out from there. And then you'll be able to figure out where your budgetary limitations are. Outside of the crown jewels, I think it's also some lower hanging fruit. Patching. Patching is very important. Think of it as simply as if you aren't patched, you're leaving your front door open. And bad actors are constantly looking for different ways in. Where are the critical vulnerabilities, and make sure you're addressing them. Some other pretty easy to implement things are multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication, when managed well, prevents about 99% of automated attacks.
Excellent. Justin, any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, where you can see some of that biggest ROI is training your employees. Historically, employees have always been referred to as kind of the weak link in the cybersecurity chain, but really they can be leveraged as that first and last line of defense, where those 9 out of 10 cyber attacks involve phishing emails in some form or another. So those phishing emails are going to your frontline employees, making sure that your employees know how to identify a potential attack, and also just as important, how to report it to the right team so then they can take action to limit the impacts to your organization. And really, it doesn't cost a ton of money to deliver training to your employees on kind of the latest attacks.
Thank you, Justin and Sarah and Jude.
Global Treasury Management products and services are provided by Wells Fargo Bank, N.A. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A. is a bank affiliate of Wells Fargo and Company. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A. is not liable or responsible for obligations of its affiliates. Deposits held in non-U.S. branches, subsidiaries, or affiliates are not FDIC or CDIC insured. Deposit products are offered by Wells Fargo Bank, N.A. Member FDIC.